Hey, what's up everyone? In today's video, we're going to be creating this draggable view. You'll see in the app that's currently running that we can pick up this basketball and move it anywhere on the screen and drop it. And then if we drop it in the basketball hoop, the ball resets to the original position. Our first step is to add this basketball and then this basketball hoop image view to our view controller, which we have here. You'll see that I've already added these images to our assets.exe assets folder. We have a basketball image and then a hoop image. We're going to add both our basketball and hoop images to our view controller class in the form of UI image views. We're going to define a private property here called basketball view, and it's going to be of type UI image view. And we're going to use UI image views initializer with a UI image. And then we're going to create a UI image. And we're going to use it with named. And in the named, we're just going to specify basketball to reference the image in assets. And then we're going to return this basketball view. And then we're also going to set the basketball view's content mode to scale aspect fit, which basically scales the image to the dimensions that we'll specify while maintaining its original height and width ratios. And we're going to do the same thing here, but for the hoop view. So we're going to change the property here to be hoop view. And then we're going to change this to be hoop. We're then going to add our hoop view and basketball view to the view controller's view. First though, we're going to define some new private constants. We're going to first create basketball view width of type CG float. And we're going to set this to be 100. And then we're going to create a hoop view width. And we're going to set this to be 200. We're then going to create a new function called setupViews. And in here we will initialize our views and add them to the view controller's view. We're going to call this function from the view.didLoad. And then in setup view, we're going to add our basketball view and hoop view to our view controller's view. We're going to do view.addSubView and then add the basketball view first. Then we will go ahead and add the hoop view. We then need to specify the basketball view's frame. We're going to use cgrect.init. For the width and height, we can just use the constant that we just defined. And then for the X and Y, we're first going to get the view controller's view size. So we're going to do view.frame.size. And this gives us a CG size. So for then the X component, we can take half the basketball view's width. And we will subtract that from size.width divided by 2. And then for the Y component, we're going to do size.height minus 200. And then we're going to set the frame for the hoop view. And this is going to look pretty similar. We're going to use the same initializer. For the X component, we're going to do something similar. We're going to do size.width divided by 2. And then we're going to minus out half the hoop view's width. And then for the Y component, we're just going to specify 200. Well, actually, we'll make this 100. And then for the width, we'll use the constants, hoop view width and then we'll use that same constant for the height. So now if we run our app, you'll see we have our hoop view and then our basketball view. And you'll notice that neither of them are, or rather just the basketball is not draggable at the moment. To make our basketball view draggable, we're going to use a pan gesture recognizer. We're going to set this up in a new private function, and we're going to call it setup pan recognizer. We're going to call this method from our setup view, or after our setup view call. And in this method, we're going to create a UI gesture pan recognizer. We're going to call it pan recognizer. And it takes in a target and an action. Our target is going to be self. That is when a pan begins on our basketball view, we're going to call a method on self, this view controller class. And then our action is the method that we're going to be calling. And this isn't defined yet, so we're just going to say selector handle pan here. We'll define this method below here, and we're going to use the Objective-C marker. And then we're going to specify this to be private and call it handle pan. And it's going to take in a pan gesture of UI pan gesture recognizer type. And so now this error will disappear. We can add this pan recognizer to our basketball view. And then we also need to specify user interaction enabled to be true on our basketball view. Otherwise, these pans will not be detected. In this method, we can define a new variable, translation, and we can initialize this with the pan gestures translation in view, which returns a CG point. And our view is going to be our view controller's view. So what will happen is that anytime we drag our basketball, this pan gesture method is called, and then the translation is how far I've dragged it. So if I've dragged it 5 pixels to the right or 5 pixels up, that'll be reflected in this translation variable. And so then we can update our basketball view center, and we'll initialize it with the X and Y component. For the X component, we'll take basketball view.center.x, and then we'll add our translation.x, and we'll do the similar thing for the Y component. We also need to set our pan gestures translation and then we also need to set our pan gestures translation back to 0. So what's happening here is that anytime I drag the basketball, handle pan is called with our translation. So if I were to drag the ball up 1 pixel, then translation.y would be 1 and translation.x would be 0. And then we need to update our basketball center to reflect that. And then we need to set our pan gestures translation to be 0. The reason we need to do this is because if I move the ball from its original position 200 pixels up, handle pan is actually called multiple times, and so if we don't set our translation to 0 every single time, then our translation will be compounded and our basketball center will be much higher than 200 pixels above its original position. So then now if we run our app, you'll see that our basketball is draggable. One thing you'll note is that the basketball disappears behind the basketball hoop. If we want it to be on top, we will add our hoop view before the basketball view, and this is just has to do with how the views are layered. And so if we change the order there, you'll see that the basketball now shows above the basketball hoop view. And then our final step is to make this basketball reset once it's dropped on the basketball hoop. Going back to the pan gesture recognizer, pan gestures have multiple states. One of them is the start state. That's when I first pick up the basketball. And then there's the dragging state, which is when I'm moving the ball around. And then there's the ending state. We're only concerned with the ending state. That is if I drop the basketball on the hoop view. And so we're going to, in this method, we're going to take the pan gesture and we're going to check its state. And we're going to check if it's ended. And so if it's ended, then we want to do something. So in this method, we're going to call detect made shot, which is going to be a new private function that we're going to define here. And in this method, we're going to detect if our basketball frame intersects with the hoop frame. So we can take basketball view.frame.intersects, which will return a Boolean saying if we intersect with another frame or not. In this frame, we're going to pass in hoop view. And we're going to call a new function that we haven't yet defined. We're going to call setup basketball view layout. And we'll go ahead and define that function below. And because we want our basketball view to recenter to its original position after intersecting with the hoop, we can take our original code we used to set the basketball's frame, and we'll just add it here. And then instead of writing this code here, we can just call setup basketball view layout. And so what's happening here is that anytime I move the basketball and handle pan is being called, once I finally let go, that's when this pan gesture.state will be equal to ended, and then we'll call detect made shot. And so if the basketball frame and the hoop frame intersect, we're going to call setup basketball view layout, which will just set the frame back to the bottom of the screen and in the center. So now if we run our app one final time, you'll see that we can move our basketball around, and then once we drop it anywhere on the hoop frame, the basketball will recenter to its original position. Okay everyone, that's it for this video. Please like and subscribe if you learned anything. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.